Had a great question come through on the channel the other day asking about how do we just maintain our fitness? Not looking to improve, maybe we're in an off-season period, or maybe you're an athlete similar to those who are chasing Ironmans or things like that early in the year with lockdowns and changes to restrictions, and ultimately the race got cancelled or postponed by 6 months. You've done this massive preparation and now you don't want to do another 6 months of continued prep. You just want to chill out for a bit and then get back into it later. So in this video, I'm going to take you through my key tips and the processes I go through just to maintain performance. Not necessarily improve, but definitely avoid any decline or going backwards. Welcome back to the channel. Nick here, making sports science simple. And in this video, we're going all the way through my process and decision-making process, thought process, whatever you like, in terms of maintaining as much performance as we can. It's a phase of training in the annual cycle you probably go through anyway. Most people, it's going to be in an off season, but for people at the moment with things like COVID hanging around, border restrictions, not being able to get to international races particularly, all of these changes to the normal might have actually thrown you into a maintenance phase without even sort of realizing it, or it might have thrown you into a maintenance phase when you weren't exactly planning for one. And what is this maintenance phase? Really, it's a period of your training where we're looking to just make the most of where we're already at. We're pretty content with the improvements we've got, but we definitely don't want to decline. We're not really chasing anything further. We're not trying to push any harder. It's just trying to keep everything all together, ready to go for whenever we next need to use it. So ultimately, that typically comes, like I said, in the off-season period. We've done a lot of big work, preparation, you've done some racing, and then you just want to take a bit of a break, but you want to keep some training in there. You don't want to lose any performance, or if a race has been postponed, you just want to take a little break and then come back into the plan later on. So the keys with maintenance phase is, first and foremost, you either use it or you lose it. It's a pretty sort of simple process, and it's something a lot of you would have heard before, but ultimately it holds true. We can detrain really, really quickly, and as most people will know, it takes sort of 4 to 6 weeks to gain some really positive adaptations. You can lose all of that in the space of a week, 10 days even. So the loss process or the detraining process is a lot faster and more rapid of a decline than the improvement side of things is on the other end of the spectrum. So that's really important that you continue to do some sort of training. That's my biggest number one tip first. You've got to do something. You can't just stop completely. Sometimes it's appropriate to stop completely if you're trying to nurse through an injury, things like that. But in most cases where we're looking at just training and you're completely fine, stopping completely is not going to be the best way to go. You need to keep something up. This is where it comes into, well, what do we do with that training? So from a volume aspect, this is where I would start to reduce the volume, particularly for the long course athletes out there, whether it be Ironman, 70.3, marathon, ultra marathon. There's no real need in this maintenance phase to do your big volume and keep pushing and stressing the aerobic system in particular, but the body's physiological processes again and again for long hours during the week. We want to try and maximize as much recovery so we can hit that next big training phase with a really solid effort, and we make sure that we're fresh and ready to go for that next big crack in. We don't want to get to that next big build, or race plans have changed. I know I've got 6 months of prep. You don't want to be sort of 3 months out going, gee, I'm really fatigued because I've been pushing for 9 months. You want to take a bit of time out, and a lot of that is going to come from recovery time, and ultimately that's less time out on the road, running, cycling, whatever you're doing. Less time out there is going to mean more recovery time, so ultimately that's the best way to go. Yes, you are going to lose a little bit of that aerobic conditioning, so I'm not saying it's just drop volume and you're going to maintain. What I'm saying is you can expect to lose a little bit of that ability to just go for a long period of time. So I'll use the example of maybe a marathon runner. You want to be able to run at 4-minute K pace for your marathon. Well, if you've dropped a bit of the volume, you probably can expect you can't hold 4-minute K pace for as long as you once did maybe 2-3 weeks ago when you were at the peak of your training. And that's kind of the point, is we don't necessarily want to be peaked now because we're in a maintenance phase. We want to be peaked ready for race day. So we don't mind if there's a bit of volume drop. That'll come back with just that consistency and building up that volume gradually over the next block of training. The key thing to avoid is dropping the intensity with that. So volume can come down, but please, please, please maintain your intensity. It's a big issue that I see with a lot of athletes, whether it be in their taper phase or if it's in a maintenance phase, off season, things like that, is they drop the intensity out and wonder why they lose a bunch of fitness really, really quickly. And the key to this is it's just all about your engine size. Whether you want to think of it in terms of VO2 max, like I commonly do and talk about on this channel, or whether you're a bit more on the percentage of FTP bandwagon, you like to use that, at the end of the day, if you lose what's at the top end and your ability to produce high intensity, that is going to ultimately dictate your lower intensity. Reason being, if my VO2 max is, say, let's use a pace, for example. If my VO2 max pace was at, I don't know, 330 pace, I'm throwing some numbers out, and my FTP or my functional thresholds may be at 4-minute K pace or 410 pace, if those two reduce because I've not been working on the high intensity and I fail to keep those systems in operation in terms of physiological processes, I might lose a little bit in terms of things like blood volume, the heart ultimately as a muscle might shrink, and really all the reverse of all the positive adaptations we've already talked about in previous videos. Everything goes backwards. If I don't do those high intensity training sessions, that's where we see the dramatic changes happen really quickly, and ultimately those intensities start to drop. So now my VO2 max intensity might only be 345 pace. My threshold, therefore, instead of being 410s, might now be 420s or 430s. What does that do? It flows down to things like your zone 2. So your zone 2 intensity, a lot of athletes complain of, I normally run at 5-minute Ks in my zone 2, but now I can't go any faster than 530s without my heart rate going through the roof. First question I ask is, well, what have you been doing from a high intensity perspective? Quite often they've been dropping that out, and that's where it flows back down the chain. Not always the case, but quite common I see is it flows back down as a result of the top end being reduced. So as I said before, the key is maintaining some high intensity. What high intensity is a little bit up to you. This is where you can get a bit creative, increase the variety in your training, maybe do a couple of weeks of a bit more VO2 focus, short, sharp, maybe then a couple of weeks after that a bit of threshold. Depends on how long you're trying to maintain for, but ultimately at least once, but ideally twice a week, doing some sort of high intensity based interval training, however you like, just trying to get the intensity up there, get your heart rate up, get all the systems firing on all cylinders. And I like to think of it as it's kind of that temporary fix. It's just trying to maintain. We're not driving an adaptation. And it's almost like your computer screensaver, if you want to think of that. You're just tapping the mouse just to keep the screen awake without it going into that sort of shutdown mode for a little bit. Because that shutdown internally is what we're talking about in terms of the backwards nature of your adaptations. So they all start to reverse, and we start to lose some of that good physiological development that we've had in our key training blocks. We're just trying to keep things up and running. We're not actually trying to gain. So 1 to 2 sessions a week, increase the variety. You just got to get some stimulus up there. Doesn't really matter what that stimulus is. You just got to really be pushing it at least 1 to 2 times a week. And that's that's really enough to maintain as much of your performance as you can. You might want to keep in some extra training here and there, and really the volume is dictated a bit by how much do you want to train. As I said before, you don't need to go crazy on volume and have it as an emphasis, but keep some in there. If you like to still train 7 days a week or 5 days a week or 4 days a week, that's perfectly fine. You can keep that schedule up and keep that routine up. I'd almost recommend a bit of that. If you want to drop out a training day and increase a bit of recovery, great. If you want to try something else, if you're a runner and you want to try a little bit of cycling, this is probably the time to do it as well. That crossover adaptation in terms of the zone 2, off legs, it's going to help you recover and repair a bit, but also it's going to keep just maintaining those aerobic processes and that good aerobic physiological process that we're looking for. So variety is really, really good. Keep that high intensity in there. You don't have to go crazy on volume. They're really the key principles. So hopefully you got a little bit out of this video. Let me know in the comments down below. What are your strategies for going through a maintenance phase? Do you follow these, or have you made some mistakes like dropping out the intensity and found it's impacted your training? Let me know down below. And also what have you done if you've had a change to your race plan? I'm always interested in how athletes at the moment are handling these last minute changes to their racing. Let me know if you have any questions or you want to chat a little bit more about that, because I know it is a pretty common problem at the moment. It's out of our hands a little bit as athletes and coaches, but it is something that a lot of people are sort of having to work through. So let me know what your thoughts are down below. I'm going to leave it there. Hope you've been enjoying these videos coming back up on the channel. Thanks for the support on the channel. Keep subscribing and sharing to as many people as possible. Looking forward to putting up some more, and we'll see you in the next one.